a very close friend of mine, and he says, the happiest day of your life is when you get that State Farm insurance contract. So they came along and changed that literally overnight. And when they did that, in a period of about 90 days, we were about a $50 million a year company, and we lost half of our business.
Hey there, friend. This is Stephanie Crevens, and you are listening to the Mid-Level Leaders Hot Mess Hotline, where we share executives' biggest, hottest of messes that they've encountered over the years so that you can learn from them too and learn to think like an entrepreneur. All right, so today's conversation is with Jerry Jones. His father founded Canon 4 here in Indianapolis back in the mid-70s, and he took over as president in 1978 and subsequently brought all of his brothers into the company to lead it. He has been an amazing president, so amazing, in fact, that EY named him Entrepreneur of the Year back in 1997, as well as Canon has won several awards like Indiana's Small Business of the Year Award, Indiana Business Ethics Award, the Spirit of Service Award through the Archdiocese of Indianapolis, and one of the best places to work here in Indiana in multiple years. And as you'll hear in this episode, he says it's not a matter of when the hot mess happens, it's a matter of when it happens. All right, so let's dig into Jerry's hot mess. Let's go. So, Mr. Jerry, tell us about that hot mess. Take us back, sir.
Okay. Well, our hot mess at Canon 4 goes back probably to about the year 2000. Okay. And what we were doing is we were a Hewlett-Packard distributor. And Hewlett-Packard was, in hindsight, they were playing kind of a dysfunctional game. And what they wanted to do is they wanted every channel to be selling as much as they possibly could. And so they were kind of letting channels cross over other channels.
Okay.
So to make a long story short, what they were doing is that we were a distributor and doing well. And they would start off and they'd say, okay, well, we're going to make this very exclusive. So you've got to buy $2 million a year from us. And we did that. And then they said, well, for a lot of distributors, that was too easy. So now it's going to be 5. Ooh. And then they went to 10. And then they said, okay, we're going to bump it up to like $20 million. And so our particular dealer rep said, do you know anybody that you could just kind of move this product out sideways to, kind of wholesale it? So that's what we were doing. So we were using this tremendous price advantage to sell wholesale, to sell retail, the whole bit. So as a byproduct of that, we developed quite a nice wholesale business. And we also developed a wonderful account, which was State Farm Insurance over in Bloomington, Illinois. And we were selling them tons of product. I mean, tons of product.
Wow, that's quite the whale, I can imagine.
It was fascinating. And so what the deal was is that, everybody was happy. I mean, we were happy and our rep was happy because he was getting commissioned and the district guy was happy and everybody was just happy, except for some of the people on the pearly white gates at Hewlett-Packard. And they said, well, this is dysfunctional.
Oh.
So, and as I look back on it, it was dysfunctional, but at the time it was working. So how would you say, it was bad, but I guess it was bad dysfunctional.
It was working for a lot of people, it sounds like.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Okay.
So they wanted a real, true wholesale channel. So they came along and changed that literally overnight. And when they did that, they completely changed our world. And I mean, it was devastating. So in a period of about 90 days,
okay,
we were about a $50 million a year company, and we lost half of our business. $25 million we lost in a period of 90 days. We lost the State Farm Insurance business. We lost our wholesale business. And, when you think back on it, if you were talking to someone and they said, we lost half of our business in 90 days, you would say, well, gee, I can see why you went out of business. That's logical,
Yes.
But we didn't.
Especially at that size and I can imagine the number of jobs it fueled, the way it contributed to administrative costs, the relationships you had. Like, that's a lot to untangle in 90 days. The revenue is one thing, but what the revenue supported is a really big problem to solve for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're exactly right. It was just, we were dealing in a game that we got to be good at, but it was a game that we really didn't want, which was very high volume, very low margin. And
high volume, low margin. Okay.
yeah, it was just that was the tough part. So, honestly, there were so many sleepless nights. I mean, I was prepared to tell our people that I'm sorry, things just aren't working out and stuff. But, what we did is we came together. And so, but let me discuss the pain a little bit more.
Yes, please.
The pain was unbelievable because, kind of what our forte was this problem solver within Hewlett Packard, and they suddenly take away our main card. And so now we were trying to regroup and say, okay, who are we? And so what we decided to do was just, we really needed to kind of retrace our steps, go back to some very, very basics. We had an unbelievable group of people. I mean, unbelievable. I have 3 younger brothers that are in the business, and they just performed to just try to work things out. Jeff is in sales. John Jones was in human resource, and Jim Jones was in operations. And everybody just said, okay, we're not going under. We're going to really fight for this.
Yes.
So the pain was understanding what kind of got us there, that hot mess of, very high volume, very low margins. And so what does your business have to look like going forward?
Mm-hmm.
And we just said, we're going to get into a product or a business that had much higher margins. And we weren't as concerned about, the beating on your chest saying we were a $50 million a year company,
I love that. So the ego component of look how big our company is.
Yep.
And that sounds really great on paper and at a party and all that stuff, but the stress of the low margin work on a day-to-day basis and the vulnerability that it put your company in, because it was, half of your revenues reliant on one relationship with HP, and I would imagine a significant bit with State Farm.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yes.
So what were those questions that you wrestled with during those sleepless nights?
Well, just, the incredible relationship we had with all of our employees, just didn't want to let them down.
Mm-hmm.
You think we have such an outstanding group of people, and we want to make sure that we could take care of them and their families. And so, the pressure of, having, at that time, we didn't have a great deal of people. We had probably, 20, 25 people, but that's 20, 25 families that, you worry yourself sick over.
Yes.
And, we were wondering, could we still maintain a relationship with Hewlett Packard and with customers? We knew we weren't going to be able to go after the really big customers like we had in the past. So, we accepted the fact we were going to go more mid-market, banks, insurance companies, attorney firms, et cetera, and school systems was kind of our niche. But so the sleepless part was just, oh my gosh, survival. Just, and I tell you, I have never, ever worried about anything. I don't know if this is an optimist or a pessimist, but I just tend to worry more about the failure. I don't think a lot about the great successes. I just think about, oh my God, what if this thing goes belly up? Where are you at now?
Yes. That is so. One, it's innate to, or it's hardwired into our brain. It's a negativity bias that we have to worry to see what could go wrong. It's a 2 million year old operating system in our brain that's always looking for danger. Mm-hmm. And it's also, in my experience, the curse of the overachiever. Like, success is like, oh yeah, we did it. Cool. Like, great. We grew to 50 million. And the overachiever is always going, but what's next? But what could go wrong? And it definitely contributes to our success, because there's an element of, we do need to be on the lookout for what could go wrong. And it can be our downfall because we're so busy worrying about what could go wrong. We don't see all the great things that are happening. We don't stop to celebrate our successes. We just kind of gloss over them to go, what's next?
Yep.
And it's that drive that is awesome and can hold us back at the same time when we don't calibrate it correctly.
Definitely hit the nail on the head. A very close friend of mine, Wally Brandt, once said something to me, and we share these stories. And he says, the happiest day of your life is when you get that State Farm insurance contract. From that day on, you worry yourself to death until you lose it. You think you would be able to enjoy that for a long. No, you get the contract and then you start worrying. What happens?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Well, and in consulting companies, because I work with a lot of professional services companies, the salespeople are always applauded for the big contract they got the signature on, right? But then it's the consultants that hold all of the worrying and in the top level leadership around, oh my God, how are we going to deliver this? No one stops to go, oh my God, thank you, consultants, for delivering on all this really hard, amazing work. It's what did sales bring us next? What did sales bring us next?
Well put.
It is how we roll as humans. So we can do things better. One of the things as I've gotten to know you better is I hear your care and concern for the families that were at Canon 4 and are at Canon 4 now, for your own family, because your family was embedded in this company as well. Your dad, I almost said invented it, created the company, and you and your brothers, started the company, and you and your brothers were the leadership. What weight were you willing to share with first your co-leaders in the company, your brothers, and the employees inside of the company as well, to help shoulder the burden of this major transition in the business?
Well, that's a great question. And what I found is that I think sometimes when you just feel like you're hitting rock bottom, you just need to kind of take a step back, look at your strengths, and assess your people. And one of the things that we had at Canon 4 was just an unbelievable culture. We prided ourselves in doing something what was called the Heritage Tour, which we would bring vendors and good customers in and actually give them a tour of our place, but describing milestones and people and grandfathers and uncles and father that had helped create this culture and stuff. So we were very, very proud of that. So when we were kind of doing this assessment, people that I knew were so good, and if I could give them kind of a new challenge. So what we were doing at that time is we said, okay, get away from the high volume, get away from the low margin. So what was it in our industry that carried a very nice margin, but, obviously lower volumes? And that was the service business. So here we were selling thousands of customers, products, owner cartridges and printers and things. And we said, why don't we be the one to service their printers? And so when in developing this, we were new to it. And what we did is we came along and we said, okay, let's just start buying up some small service companies. And in doing that, we were kind of testing and we were buying some of the loyalty, and we went to a couple people. So I think we ended up buying like 5 companies during that time period. Wow. But to go back to the internal part is that, I relied heavily on my brothers. So my brothers, they were smart and just, very energetic and really wanted to, solve some problems with the whole service thing. And so we had to just literally redo our business. I mean, everything now was totally different mindset. It was, trying to get in there, build that loyalty with that service team, get the customers involved. How do you incentivize your sales? How do you convert that into a real viable thing? And then how do you be competitive in the marketplace? So, my 3 brothers of Jeff, Jim, and John, and then we had just an outstanding group of people. Gosh, Colleen and Ken and Angie, and it was just, it was an incredible group of people that were really helping us, at each platform. Yeah. So once we started to see what it could look like, we started to get very excited. Now, one of the things that, once again, I mean, for a lot of companies, and I'm not trying to overly boast here, but we just ran a good, clean ship. And, we never overspent. We never took more money out of the company than what was deserving. So
Mm-hmm.
we had a
Mm-hmm.
very nice retained earnings. And so when we were deciding to pivot, which we did, that pivoting was, how do you fund it? And so we had good internal resources that we could, now rely on internally. And then the bank loved us because we didn't owe any money. So the
Yep.
bank was able to help support that and, start to put together really a nice package for us.
Yeah. Two questions about your people, and then I want to take a commercial break and we're going to talk about what was different for you, for your leadership, for the company, because you all went through this really tough experience. One was, what did you see from beyond your brothers, but the rest of the team, like the other 20 or so that were part of Canon 4, what did you see from them that told you, oh, these folks are on board. They're gonna do what they can. They're gonna step up to the challenge and help us pivot as well.
When you look at leadership, I think it's a very interesting thing because, I've studied leadership extensively over the years. And, you have what you'd call positional leadership.
Hmm.
And that is, do you have a title
Yep.
that kind of helps entitle you to, lead people? Or do you have non-positional? I mean, we had people at Canon 4 that didn't necessarily have the title, but proved to be great leaders and were exercising that.
Yes.
So we developed, instead of a mission statement in the early days, we kind of had a cultural statement. It was, this is who we are, and we called it the Canon 4 way.
Hmm.
So our entire team would reference the Canon 4 way. And they might say, oh, geez, we can't go that route. That's just not the Canon 4 way of doing things.
Yes.
So we would also look at people and,
Mhm.
that's how we hired and how we fired. And so, somebody might come and just say, they're just not fitting in with the Canon 4 style of the way we do things. So as I saw more and more people jump on the bandwagon of the Canon 4 way, I knew we had just good people, good leaders that we could carry out these things.
Yes. They were either for the Canon 4 way or they were not. The follow-up question to that then is, what did you see from the people that you knew were not going to be with you long term because they were not getting themselves on board to the Canon 4 way?
Well, you've been in business long enough, you've never ever let someone go too soon. So, we would always feel guilty and feel like we had to, nurture and, whatever it is. And you would try and try and try. And then finally you just say, that's just not working. We've got to help them find another job or something like that
Yep.
because, it just takes one to bring down so many. And we had a couple of those times where people were, just not on board, kind of fighting us and things. And you'd say, it's just not worth it. Just
Yes.
got to move on.
Yeah, it is that resistance. And I hear that a lot. Oftentimes, you know, clients will ask me, like, we've been trying and trying and trying and trying, and it's just not working. And my counsel is always 90 days. And I know that feels rather abrupt. It's the 90 days, create a solid action plan with milestones and goals for them to demonstrate that they're on board. And if
Right.
after 90 days, you're not seeing it, they're not feeling it, it's time to help them find the place they're meant to make a difference. It's just not your place. It doesn't mean they're bad. It doesn't mean that you didn't try hard enough. It means this is just not their place to live out their purpose in the world. And that needs to be okay.
Right.
But the try for 6 months, 9 months, a year, I know that feels good on the heart, but the disruption to the culture is so significant that it needs to be dealt with relatively speedily.
I know. And I know you've experienced this, that when that person leaves, you can't believe how just the whole atmosphere in a business can change, how one person could
Yes.
create such a, negativity to the environment. And, that person's gone and everybody just takes a deep breath and go, oh, wow, why didn't we do that 6 months ago?
Yes. It's like this breath of fresh air. You're like, oh, I can breathe again.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yes.
So
Oh,
true.
Thank you for validating that experience. Too many leaders need to follow your counsel sooner rather than later. So,
Thank you.
yep. All right, well, let's take a break. We're going to come back, and there's been many years between that 90-day holy shit moment. And I know that you led Canon 4 to a successful exit for you and your family and have continued to have a successful company after your departure. So we'll talk about how you made that happen because of this terrible challenge that became an amazing opportunity. So we'll be right back.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, we take a quick break from this amazing conversation today. I want to share with you a new tool that I have for you. I think that there's a myth in our workplaces. Well, let me say this. I know there's a myth in our workplaces that meetings have to suck, and I don't believe that whatsoever. By all accounts, our time in meetings have doubled, if not more, since the start of the pandemic. And this time with your colleagues should not be a waste of time. It should be the most valuable. So if you're looking for more resources to lead meetings that are productive, powerful, impactful, and have everyone participating, get over to my website at stephaniecrevens.com/lead kick-ass meetings and get some new tools so that when you leave a meeting with your colleagues, you're not left going, what the actual F was that? You're going, yes, we're going to take on the world together. Let's get this done, because it was an unbelievably powerful meeting. Those tools are out there for you, my friends, and they're on my website today, stephaniecrevens.com/lead kick-ass meetings. Now, let's get back into that conversation. All right. So you kind of get hit in the face in 2000 with this situation. What year, what time frame would you say, okay, we have pivoted out of what we've needed to. We now have a strong business doing service, serving mid-market companies, serving in the high margin way, high value way that we now want to. What year would you say that really solidified for the business?
I would say that took us a good 3 to 5 years
Mhm.
because we were not only, changing our mindset, but we were acquiring small businesses. And, that's also another cultural challenge to bring new people into your business environment and get them on board. And for the most part, it was pretty successful. It takes time on that. So 3 to 5 years probably was the time period.
Okay. 3 to 5 years. So we're looking at 2003, 2005-ish
Yeah.
that you all felt you were back on solid ground.
Right.
Okay. And then meanwhile, 2001 happens where there was some weird economic volatility.
Wow. Yeah.
It was just a strange time. Just a small little tech bubble, no big deal.
I mean, the world stood still and our business was a byproduct of that standing still. I mean, there for a while, the phones did not ring, and
yes.
it was the most panic-stricken times on top of
Mhm.
everything else. I mean, you could see with, throw all that in to what was happening. It was like,
Yes.
oh, I just pray and pray and pray that we can
Mhm.
get through this thing and do whatever we have to do.
Yeah. Oof. In this world where we tend to really value innovation, growth, doing more new, bigger, badder kind of stuff, the value of solid companies like a Canon 4 that was founded in the 70s and had 40 years of history, foundation, cash flow, customer experience, relationships, those are the institutions that create stability when some of the newer things in the world get rocked, and when our company is attacked by terrorists and business slows to a halt because travel is slowed to a halt, especially back then. I mean, I think we need to give more credence to businesses like that have been around, because they really are the foundation for rocky times. They create stability, in my
Mhm.
opinion.
I
So
agree. I agree with that. That's such a great comment because, certainly 9/11, there was the financial bubble in, 2008. There's the
Mm,
pandemic. And each time, the way you look at it, it's not if you're going to get hit with a hot mess. It's just how do you work through it? And so you look at the entrepreneurs during every one of those stages of crisis and the ones that have come out ahead. I mean, you see of hundreds of restaurants that have closed. And then you see many, many restaurants that are doing well because they figured out how to do things on the fly and to go
Yes.
and eat outside and do whatever it takes. And they're flourishing. And so I just give all the credit in the world to the people that, have learned how to just cope with that, because
Yes.
it's the scariest thing in the world. Everything you own, you think is going up in flames.
Yes. Yep. And especially in American small businesses, we forget that, for a lot of owners, that's your retirement, right? If you can't sell the business, you don't have a retirement. And not that you're in the business to sell it, but that's where your retirement funds are. That's your asset. And we think just because owners are owners on paper that it's something superficial when it's actually very, very deep. And the best owners that I know are taking care of those 25 families like you were, not just their own. And so the level of connection, interconnectedness that is in that business goes far beyond what I think most people on the outside think that it does.
Oh, I totally agree. And I was very fortunate because we had people that just truly bought in. I mean,
Yeah.
it was as much their business as it was our business, and they truly, truly, truly felt the pain of what the Jones family was going through, and they, just wanted to do everything in their power. The number of times I would sit with our, CFO Harry Deering and just, go over this stuff, and sometimes he was just naturally he was the bearer of bad news, but you just had to hear it to say,
Yep.
boy, if we don't change some things quickly, this is going to be a train wreck.
Yes. Oh man, isn't that fun stuff to hear?
Oh, great.
Ugh, yeah. So, as you mentioned, you know, at your stage of career, you've been through many ups and downs. And I love how you said it's not a matter of if you're going to face a hot mess, it's a matter of when and how you face it. So you've had the good fortune of being through several volatile times in the economy that have impacted how your business did business. Why are you stronger because of it?
Well, I think that one of the things that you really tend to try to understand a little bit better, and that is when the company was going through rapid growth, it was kind of like the Hewlett Packard thing kind of fell on my shoulders. It wasn't that, I probably didn't do a good enough job of trying to translate some of that to some of the other people in the company. But I had, a person, Laura, who was really helping me with this, and Colleen, and we were just kind of managing that, the dealers and the State Farm insurance, et cetera. Well, as the
Mhm.
company was growing, that was such a major focus. When that ended, I had to sit back and just say, now, wait a minute. There are some really, really good people in here that are they've got to take and kind of pick up. I'm not saying pick up the slack because they were always so good about that. But what they needed to do was just be much more innovative with their own resources. How can they take on a leadership role? And everybody did. So I was kind of, in a way, kind of stepping back a little bit and letting many of these really talented people step forward. And that's where the service business, which was a real high touch business, it just needed more people to be able to look over the shoulder of that. So I think that that was one of the major things that I learned is that, you don't have to do it all by yourself. And the likelihood is you're going to absolutely hit your head on the ceiling, and you're just not going to grow unless you have that, those people below you or at your own level. So like I was saying, my brothers were just phenomenal. And they just, they picked up the pieces and ran with it and did phenomenal. And so did so many other people in the company. They just really reacted. So if you had to say, how would you translate that to a young entrepreneur? I would say, you need bench strength. And if you don't hire people smarter than you're making a terrible, terrible mistake. You have
Yes.
that bench.
Yes. Oh, you've got so many nuggets here. I can't stop taking notes. I got to make sure to include these. I mean, that definitely resonates with me. I have hit my head on my own ceiling of my own creation based on ideas, capacity, what I know how to do well. I've stopped the growth of my own business because I've been it for too long. And now I'm in the process of building out the bench in a sustainable way. And you see it take off. And too many managers, directors, vice presidents, CEOs, you're doing the exact same thing in whatever your business is. It doesn't matter if it's your department, your division, the entire organization, because you're unwilling to share responsibility, accountability, workload, innovation, brainstorming, because you think you have to do it all yourself because of your title, and you're unwilling to share that leadership. So you're stopping the growth of the company. I see it every single day.
I do too. I see it a lot. I think another thing that is so helpful, and I would encourage once again every entrepreneur to look at this, and that is, if at some point in your career you need to sit back and say, okay, if I'm going to sell this business, what does it have to look like? What does a buyer want in our business? And so
Uh-huh.
we did that. We started going through just, loose exercises, maybe about 5 years before we actually sold the company. And it was just incredible because if you have a good financial person, and we had an excellent one, they'll say, well, your EBITDA needs to be X. Well, how do you improve your EBITDA? Well, you're going to
Yep.
have to do some expenses, and then you say, what does a prospective person or company want that wants to buy you? Well, they want a good updated account base. They want to show that you have sustainable profitability, meaning you want things on contract. You have a lot of things there that you just say, wow, I think this could really help us. So we really, really worked hard that last 5 years to just make sure that the business was healthy and was sellable. And the funny thing is, when you go through that exercise, you may decide you never want to sell it, and that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yep.
we were willing to ride it out for a lot longer, but suddenly a great opportunity came along, and we decided to exercise that.
I love that proactivity. So about 5 years before the sale, you're looking at what is a successful exit? How can we design towards that?
Yes.
And just because of the power of the universe, it then became a successful exit. And you all were ready for that. Same as you were ready for hits to your cash flow and business stability in terms of revenue coming in, which still put you in a positive perspective to borrow money to maintain operations and grow in the way that you did. I love that proactivity, man. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The world needs more of that. Well, I'm going to ask you one more question. I'll let you get back to changing your part of the world right now. Thinking back to being in that CEO suite and the support you needed from those around you, when another hot mess happens in our business environment that we cannot control, hope to God it's not another pandemic, but Lord only knows. But there's always an external factor that's going to put pressure on our businesses that impact us. How do you hope that the mid-level leaders of the future will step up to support their executive team?
That's a great question. Well, that mid-level manager or whatever it is, they certainly have to understand the leader.
Okay.
It's their responsibility to get to know them.
Yep.
Really want to understand the culture of the company. I always felt that, every good mid-level manager was smart enough to get a mentor in the business. And whether it was myself or one of my brothers, they had a good mentor.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing when it comes to that is that, a lot of times, if you remember growing up, I don't know, what kind of a, household you had, but, my mom and dad were wonderful, loving, caring people. And they didn't, they weren't ones to come along and smack you all the time. They in turn built an environment where you didn't want to disappoint them.
Mm.
Consequently, I feel like that's a similar environment, in businesses. You don't have to go along and start, slapping your hand down on the table and getting mad at everybody. You just have to build a nice culture of communication. And I was so fortunate because I just felt that the culture at Canon 4 was people did not want to disappoint us, myself and my brothers. And so there was just great, great communication. And I think that's a transferable skill that anyone that had worked at Canon 4, I think they could take that skill set to other companies. And I would hope that there's just communication. You just have to keep talking through the whole thing.
Yes.
If I was, maybe this is a different way of answering your question. If I was to say, what would I do if I was starting over right now? I would say, well, number one, I would be highly selective of the company that I was going to work for. And in the interview process, I would flat out ask that manager if they knew what their own mission statement was. And the likelihood is most of them don't.
True.
And, and do you have a core value statement in your business? And then I would say, I would also want to hear just more about that. How exactly are people assessed and how do they progress through the company lines? And then I just would absolutely latch a hold of a good mentor, and I would learn the business diligently. And because that's how you're going to move ahead in that company, is understand the business.
Yes. And I want to connect the dots between what you just said, where, you had employees who didn't want to disappoint leadership. And listening to your story today, I would also say you took to a ownership of you didn't want to disappoint your employees either, because
So
in your role, you wanted to create that financial stability for them and their family. And
you're right on the money.
okay, yeah, that two-way responsibility to each other is where trust, communication, transparency can happen in really deep, meaningful ways that sustains the culture that you were creating. And I know folks are listening in. I can hear it already through the interwebs. But Stephanie, my CEO, doesn't feel that responsibility towards me. And I would say they probably do. It just doesn't get communicated in the way that you can hear it. And if that's genuinely true, find a place where that is true, where you don't want to disappoint them and they don't want to disappoint you. There are cultures out there, and I've had those folks on my podcast because I tend to only work with really amazing people. They do feel that responsibility to you. I know that to be true in a lot more cultures. It may just not be communicated in the way that you can hear it. So
Yeah, great point. Because don't you think that there is a certain level of vulnerability that a leader has to show? Because you can't go behind that door and just it's like the Wizard of Oz. What's behind the curtain? You just times you have to show your vulnerability, and that's where people, I think, realize that you're a person they want to follow and work with.
yes, absolutely. Leaders in some ways have to put on a delicate balance of what vulnerability looks like, because they know things about the business that you don't or can't know. And so it's, how do they be vulnerable, but also not scare the pants off of you that the business is going to fold? Because there are things that happen with cash flow behind the doors that the rest of the business will not know, nor should they, because to the uneducated eye and ear, it creates a fear that it's not worth it. It's just not. And I've had that guest on my podcast. David Fisher tells that story on our podcast of how he went through that and gave up his own paycheck, and other people gave up their own paycheck, and they restructured commission and sales to balance cash flow so everybody could still get paid that absolutely needed to and had to. They didn't know about it till they listened to the podcast episode a good 20, 25 years later. That's the reality of how these businesses get managed. And just, it's the reality of business cash flow. Like, it's not a steady Eddie game. There's a ton of volatility behind it that folks just won't hear about, but they still deserve and need to get paid and need to crank out the work to solve for problems.
Stephanie, what we did is in 2008, it was very, very, very difficult.
Oof, I bet.
So the Jones family was the first ones to say, okay, we're going to reduce our pay substantially. And you know that there was a couple of people in the business that said, we should do that too. So we had an executive team, and the executive team said, we will reduce ours. So
Wow.
what we did is we figured out, so let's just say we were, reducing it by 20%. We kept track of all that. And at a point in time, we were able to repay them all the money that they had deferred with interest.
Wow.
So that's, once again, how you build the team.
Yes, that is. I love stories like that. Thank you. Jerry, thank you so much for sharing this experience and this hot mess with us. There's just so many great lessons that, frankly, I feel like I could use, and I know our listeners can use as well. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, Stephanie. Thank you. It's been delightful.
Same here.
Thank you.
My friend, during that conversation, did you hear how that desire for accountability, care, concern was a two-way street for Jerry? That's part of his success. Not only was he concerned about his family and his family-owned business, he was concerned about all of the employees and their families in the business. That is the level of care and concern that you need for a culture to really thrive as a culture. You need that two-way accountability between the C-suite's roles and other employees' roles, from manager, director, all the way down to individual contributors. I want to share with you the top lessons that stood out to me from my conversation with Jerry. And wherever you're listening or watching in, I would love to hear yours too, so that we can learn from your experience and your perspective, wherever you sit today. And so I want to highlight what I have for you in my notes from when Jerry and I were chatting. The first one I heard that really just jumped off the page for me, right? Anyone who's successful, it's not a matter of if the hot mess will happen. It's a matter of when the hot mess happens and how you get through it. It's that pivoting, that flexibility, that adaptability, that resilience that creates a long-term successful business leader, regardless of title. To leapfrog off of that, did you hear him? There's non-positional leadership and there's positional leadership. Especially during times of struggle in a business, we need those with non-positional leadership to step up to the plate and lead from wherever you're at. And in fact, I would argue that every day we should all be contributing as leaders, regardless of our title or our role in our business, every single day. Trust me when I say that it will make the hard times not quite as hard as if you're leading from where you're at every single day. You know, he said on here, and I'm just looking at my notes, my friends, so I want to make sure I capture everything here. You know, in his experience, bringing on Hewlett-Packard to sell their services in multiple channels, that was major growth for them. It didn't necessarily mean major innovation, but it was major growth. And he said what he learned when that relationship, as it was ending and changing so drastically, was that he had to know that he needed to step back so that others could step forward. Where is there a place in your leadership where you need to step back so other folks can contribute more? And that doesn't make you lazy. It doesn't mean that you are trying to get out of work. In fact, what it means is you're creating a succession plan for yourself so that you can be promoted. Because if you can't be replaced at the role that you're in today, you can't be promoted. So if you're ambitious, like I think you are, you need to be able to allow people to take on pieces of your job so that you can do more strategy, more focused work, more discerned work, and let them step up and lead in new ways, because you're stepping out of some of the things that can truly be delegated down. One of the things that all of us can do as leaders is ask, what is a successful exit? In Jerry's situation, a successful exit was selling the company for the benefit of him, his family, and I'm sure his employees too. And as a leader in someone else's company, my guess is that that's not what your successful exit is. But your successful exit needs to be defined. You need a plan. You need a timeline. And sometimes that exit is moving up. Sometimes that exit is moving over. Sometimes that exit is contributing in a more focused way. You might even want less responsibility as you mature in age. That is certainly something that we have helped our clients with, because that's what they want for their career. There's no assumption or no rules that say every single year as you approach 62, 65, 67, you have to have even more responsibility. It's okay to ask for less responsibility, but define what your successful exit is and then create the plan to make it happen, regardless of what your exit means for you, for your company, inside, outside of the company. No judgment whatsoever, whatever is best for you. But even if you're not an entrepreneur, you can begin planning your successful exit starting today. And Jerry's last piece of advice here, understand what your leader needs. Understand what your CEO needs in every season of the business. Get to know him or her. Ask for their mentorship. You're here because you're ambitious. Be ambitious. Ask for more. Ask for more opportunity. Ask for more understanding and transparency in the business so that you can contribute more. That's the bottom line. And because you contribute more, you're going to be able to grow more. You're going to get the visibility that you need and deserve in order to contribute more effectively to the business in the way that you can. So, my friends, that is what I heard. And so many other nuggets, but I would love to hear from you at this point. I've done enough talking for today, right? I want to hear from you. What are you learning from this podcast? What are you learning from the Hot Mess Hotline? And now let's get off the internet. Let's get back to the most impactful work that you can get done today, this week, this month. And I'll see you next time, my friend.